Good morning. I'm just sitting here hanging out with my friends in the Galapagos Islands. We're going to do a video on 6.3 finding minimum sample sizes. So we're going to start off with your notes. In your notes, there's only one small section on this. It's right here, the end of 6.3. It says if we want to find the minimum sample size, we have this formula, n equals p hat q hat times z score from the confidence divided by margin of error squared. And then we're going to make sure we round it to a whole number once again, because this is a sample size. Sample sizes, we use whole number objects because it's usually the number of people or things, right? So the formula, if you have a p hat and q hat, you'll go ahead and plug it in. If you don't, a lot of times they won't give you a preliminary estimate. So then you use 0.5, 0.5. The reason that is because if you use a 50-50 for your p hat, q hat, that gives you the largest possible sample size. Every other value for p hat and q hat will give you a smaller sample size. So if you don't know p hat and q hat, using 50-50 will give you the biggest option. So if you have a larger sample than you need, that's okay. If you had a smaller sample than you need, that wouldn't be okay. That's why they're going to use 50-50. So if you look at the example in your notes, it says we have a confidence level of 95%, which we know the z-score from section 6.1 is 1.96 for 99 or 95%. It says a previous study shows 80% have a computer at home. That's going to be our p hat. If p hat is 80%, that means q hat is 1 minus 80.8, 80%, so that'd be 20% or 0.2. And then it says within 2%. Now, this is something that we saw in the last section when we were finding the sample size. Whenever it says within is going to give you your margin of error. So that within 2%, that's your margin of error, your E, to fill into the formula. All right, so find the minimum sample space needed. So let me switch over and I can show you my work. Just real quick here. So here it is. So our formula, right, we have up here, and it says confidence 95%. Like I said, z-score is then 1.96. We have that in our notes. P hat they gave us was 80%. 1 minus p hat is 20% for q hat. And the margin of error is at 2%, and 2% is 0.02 as a decimal. So to find my sample size, I take p hat times q hat times my z-score divided by my margin of error, and then I square it all. Right, so I'm going to type that into my calculator. So 0.8 times 0.2. I'm going to multiply that by 1.96 divided by 0.02, and then square it. That's going to give me an n value of approximately 1,536.64, which, because it's a sample size, number of people having computers, we're going to round it up to 1537. So 1537 is going to be your answer for that one. Now, if you're doing the work for today, that's number 17, you'll see for part A, it says no preliminary estimates available. So for this one, if we use the same example from your notes, if it would say no preliminary estimates, then instead of using this p hat q hat, because you wouldn't have it, you would just treat p hat as 0.5 and q hat as 0.5, and then go through the problem the same. And what you'll see is this will give you a bigger number, right? So I can go ahead and try it. So 0.5 times 0.5 times 1.96 0.02 squared. So let's look to see what that gives us if we type it into the calculator. So that gives us exactly 2,401, right? So you'll see, like I said before, if you're using 50-50, no preliminary estimates available, you're always going to get a larger sample size, which is okay, because if you don't have those estimates available, you're going to want a larger sample size to get better results. So part A in the homework, you'll be doing something like this with the 50-50. Part B, it's going to go back through and say, just kidding, we actually have a p hat q hat. and then you'll do something like this. And then part C is going to say compare them. And when you compare them, your answer will pretty much always be the same. It's going to say something like the estimate with 50-50 with no preliminary estimate is going to be a larger sample than the sample size needed with the actual values for p hat and q hat. So that's finding the minimum sample using population, proportion, confidence intervals. We have this formula that's in your notes. Make sure you get that down. And remember that the z-scores, they come from your notes, right? But you can also find them, like for this one, if we have 95%, 5% left over, 2.5% on this side, 2.5% on this side, we can just take the inverse norm of 2.5%, and that will give us that 1.96 value, right? It will give us a negative for the first one, a positive for the second one. We're always going to use the positive value for these. So that's the video. Please give those problems a try, and we will see you soon.